Welcome to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae, filling in for Julie Grant this morning. Thank you for following along with us. Over the next 2 hours, we are going to be catching you up on day one of the Dad in a Ditch murder trial. It's our latest trial out of Iowa, and the judge has ordered in this case that we can't air this trial live. There's a 24-hour delay on it. So this is testimony from yesterday that we haven't aired yet. We are starting with highlights from openings and then taking you through a can't-miss police interrogation in this case. But before we get to that testimony, let's get you caught up on the background of this case. Here's Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson with the report.
55-year-old Dennis Jones was shot and killed in April of this year. His 26-year-old son, Alec Jones, allegedly pulled the trigger, and his youngest son, Nathan, allegedly helped cover up the murder. A mail carrier found Dennis Jones' body in a ditch by the side of a country road on April 26th. Investigators believe Jones was not shot in that ditch. They obtained a search warrant for his home, where he lived with his 2 sons and his wife. Shannon Jones spoke with news station KCCI.
I got nobody now. I live in this big house all alone.
She told KCCI she was home sleeping when her husband was shot.
I can't really tell you anything. I don't know nothing by what, I don't know. They're good boys. This wasn't premeditated. Denny and I had an altercation earlier that Thursday evening, and I went to bed.
After police searched the family home, they arrested the brothers. According to court documents, the defendants made admissions about the crime to other witnesses. Alec and Nathan Jones pleaded not guilty. Alec is charged with first-degree murder. And according to court documents, he says he was intoxicated and shot his father in self-defense. Nathan Jones is charged with aiding and abetting murder in the first degree. Their trials are being held separately.
Let's get you into the courtroom now, beginning with the state's opening statements in this case.
Families aren't perfect. This case centers around the Jones family. They live here in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Now, it's a different family setup. The household consists of Miss Shannon Jones, mom, Mr. Dennis Jones, dad, Nathan Jones, and the defendant, Alec Jones. In addition, in the household, there's also Mr. Jones' young girlfriend. It's interesting, different, but it worked. It worked for the Jones family until the defendant decided it didn't. On April 25th, 2024, it was a normal day. Dennis Jones went to work, came home around 4:30. Everyone seemed to be home, and there was an argument between Dennis and Shannon. The defendant and Mr. Jones's girlfriend were at the home at the time. Like I'd indicated, families are different. This was a normal day for them. The argument occurred, it dissipated, and everyone went about their way. Miss Jones retreated upstairs. Nathan Jones was at a bar with some of his friends. The defendant went upstairs with his mother. Mr. Jones stayed downstairs, and his girlfriend left the house. Now, at approximately 10 p.m. that evening, the defendant started a string of behavior that ultimately led to the death of his own father. You see, the defendant was sick of his father, sick of living with him, sick of the household he was creating, sick of his girlfriend, all of it. So he took matters into his own hands. He started messaging his brother. Where are you? Are you coming back? Went so far as to indicate to Nathan that somebody was going to end up dead that night. Those are the defendant's own words that you will see. He went to Bootleggers. He picked up his brother. You'll see him on video surveillance walk into the bar. You'll see what he's wearing. He grabs Nathan. They go back to the house. At approximately 11 p.m., the defendant is there with his brother. And you'll see on actual video surveillance from the house, inside the house, that Dennis Jones, he had to have a video camera in his room. And you'll see him on that video camera, looking out the window, slowly walking around, peeking out of his door, going in and out of the room. And you'll see the defendant walk in his room. You'll hear a phone call made to Webster County Dispatch at approximately 11:24, where Dennis expresses to the operator, something weird is going on. I think my children, they're walking around with black gloves on. I think one of them might shoot me. At 11:31, he texts his daughter, who no longer lives in the house. I think that Alec and Nathan are going to do something to me. During this whole time, Aiden Pate and Michaela McNeely are sitting across the street in their car. Nathan had asked them to come there and pick them up and take them back to the bar. And then you'll see from video surveillance of a neighbor, 5 or 6 shots. You'll see the flash. You'll see someone running out to the car. Go, go, go! The car drives off. There's also an individual who will testify regarding location data from the whole evening that follows some of the cell phones. One of our investigators will put that together. The car drives around the block. And you'll hear Aiden and Michaela testify that per the defendant's instruction, they go back to the house quickly. Then per the defendant's instruction, drive down to the river. He throws the gun in the river. Per the defendant's instruction, they go back to the house. They take his father's dead body and put it in Aiden Pate's trunk. Per the defendant's instruction, they go out by Otho in Webster County and dump his father's half-naked body in a ditch with a rug thrown over it and the defendant's dirty t-shirt placed over his head. And then per the defendant's instruction, all 4 of those individuals, they go back to the bar. The defendant goes back into the bar, drinks, stays till close. Then they go back to the house, and per his instruction, they clean it up. Patch bullet holes, paint over some stuff, throw away the dirty towels, and get rid of the bloody rug. Then he goes to bed. That night, the evidence will show you was a calculated sequence dedicated to hunting and killing Dennis Jones. The defendant is taken with investigators and he goes and gives an interview. He sits down with Sergeant Van Waffs, Detective Allie Thompson, starts talking to them, tells them about his night last night. His story changes and changes again and again. You'll hear that 2.5-hour interview, and you'll be able to detect how many times that story changes until investigator Headland comes in and starts talking to him. And then the defendant coldly describes what happened that evening. He shot his father, threw the gun in the river, took his body out to Otho and dumped it, went back to the bar, cleaned up. You'll hear it. Now again, like I said, families can be different. You'll get to judge this family yourself. Even the defendant says in his interview, there were some normal arguments. It happens. Again, an interesting dynamic. But what the evidence is going to show is that between April 25th and 26th, the defendant stalked, planned, and calculated to kill his own father, and did what he had to do to cover it up. Now, it's the request of the state of Iowa that you carefully listen to all of the testimony, view the exhibits, and at the end of this trial, you will see the actions, the sequence, and the statements made by defendant Alec Jones. And we are confident that at the end of this trial, you will return a verdict of guilty to murder in the first degree.
And that wraps up the prosecution's opening statement. And now let's hear the response from the defense.
Or Ms. Flickinger, does the defense want to make opening remarks today?
Your Honor, we would reserve our opening statement.
You may do so. Thank you.
All right, the defense electing not to give their opening statement at this time. That means they could give an opening statement at the beginning of their case once the prosecution has presented all of their evidence in their case in chief. Let's bring in Philip Dubé, who's standing by. Philip, your thoughts on the state's opening? I didn't hear a motive. Maybe you heard one for this killing, but also the defense's decision to wait.
Good morning, by the way. I got to tell you, first of all, I didn't find the prosecutor all that effective. Her voice was a little shrill and strident for my palate, if you will. And she was kind of sing-songy, almost giving her version in iambic pentameter, you know? She needs to keep it a little more somber and flat. But having said that, she does have her storyline, and she does not have a motive. That is correct. What I don't like, and I have never done it in my career, Julia, is reserved an opening statement on behalf of a client. I just don't do it. And the reason why, first of all, I understand why they probably did it in this case. It's just a guess that defenses are very fluid, and they can develop pre and mid trial, and you're just kind of waiting to see how the evidence comes in against your client. But for now, it sounds like they're trying to do the wait and see approach, and if they don't like how it unfolds mid trial, they're going to go with the reasonable doubt, you know, Lady Liberty type defense, wave the American flag, and tout the Constitution for putting the prosecution to their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But I don't like it. It sounds like they're going with either a self-defense or defense of others type scenario, but we won't know until the evidence starts coming in. But for now, I don't like it when juries don't have anything to gnaw on behalf of a defendant, because right now, as we know statistically, juries tend to make up their mind during opening statement as to which way they're going to vote, even though they haven't heard a lick of evidence. And when the defense gets up there and says nothing other than we're going to reserve at this point, Your Honor, it means that the prosecution is winning statistically.
And they are listening to this witness testimony without anything on the other side but what the state has to say. Let's listen to the first witness. It's one of the people who discovered Dennis Jones's body in the ditch. It was a postal worker. Let's go in.
Or Ms. Flickinger, does the defense want to make opening remarks today?
Your Honor, we would reserve our opening statement.
You may do so. Thank you.
All right, we are going to stand by for a moment because we do have that first witness. That was, again, a repeat of the defense reserving their right to give an opening at the beginning. Let's listen to the postal worker, witness number one for the prosecution.
On April 26th of this year, were you performing your normal route and your normal duties with the Postal Service?
Yes, I was.
What do you drive? Do you drive a postal truck, or what do you use?
I drive a private vehicle.
On that day, did you come across anything that was out of place for you on a normal work day?
Yes, I did.
And how did you become aware of that?
Well, when I was out on my route, another driver flagged me down, and he said he seen something in the ditch, wanted me to go check it out. So we went down the gravel road about a half mile, and in the ditch there was something laying in the ditch. So I walked down in the ditch. There was a piece of carpet on it. I pulled the carpet off, and it appeared to be a body. So
let's go back a little bit. Do you remember where you were when the other driver spoke to you?
Yeah, we were on 280th and 169 at the corner there.
And so you went back down 280th Street about half a mile?
Yes. There was a rug on top of his.
If you go back to 14?
Yeah, that rug that's in that picture. That's what I pulled off to see what it was.
That was over top?
Yes.
And you removed that?
Yes.
What did you do when you made those observations after you moved that rug?
It appeared to be a body, so I got out of the ditch and dialed 911 and reported what I saw.
After you made that call, what did you do?
I waited for the law enforcement to come.
All right, we are again watching the case against Alec Jones. He was 26 years old at the time. He has a brother who's 21, Nathan Jones, who's being tried separately. His trial will be at a different date. We have to squeeze in a break. We're going to get you back in for more testimony next from the assistant medical examiner. Stay with us. Let's get you back now to the dad in a ditch murder trial out of Iowa, where 26-year-old Alec Jones is accused of gunning down his father earlier in the year and then dumping the body into a ditch.
I can't really tell you anything. I don't know nothing by what, I don't know. They're good boys. This wasn't premeditated. Vinny and I had an altercation earlier that Thursday evening, and I went to bed.
Prosecutors allege that Alec Jones was upset about his home life, saying their father was abusive toward his mother and moved his girlfriend into the family home. Now, among the state's first witnesses is Dr. Rory Deal, an assistant medical examiner who testified that Dennis Jones died from multiple gunshot wounds. Let's listen to some of that testimony.
So if you'll take a look at State's Exhibit 22, is this after you had cleaned the body?
It is.
Okay. Tell me, what are we looking at in State's Exhibit 22?
Just above the ruler labeled 240-2263, there's an entrance gunshot wound to the left forehead.
Can you describe the trajectory of that wound?
Sure. This projectile entered the left forehead and exited the head in the right posterior scalp, the left occipital scalp. And that trajectory was backwards, rightwards, and slightly downward.
So you're making some motions with your hand. Let's go to State's Exhibit 23. Would that be the exit wound?
It is.
Okay. And tell me, do you see anything what's known as stippling around this wound?
Typically, stippling is identified on the entrance wounds, and the State Exhibit number 22 does not demonstrate the presence of any stippling.
So what is stippling?
Stippling is little punctate red injuries that might encircle an entrance gunshot wound, and they are caused by unburnt gunpowder expelling from the barrel of the weapon and then burning or injuring the skin.
When would you expect to see stippling in a wound?
Generally speaking, if a gun is fired and there's no intermediary target and the projectile and that gunpowder can impact an individual, it can leave that injury, stippling, within 6 to 12 inches distance. So it's a means that we use to determine the range of fire or give a possible range of fire.
So closer or further away?
Correct.
Okay. So would you expect to see stippling when an individual was shot at a closer range?
Depending upon the ammunition, the weapon used, if it's close enough, you would see stippling.
Okay, thank you. And let's go to State's Exhibit 24. Can you tell me what you observe in State's Exhibit 24?
This image shows a wound just below the left ear. This is another separate entrance gunshot wound of the left upper neck.
And any stippling observed at that wound?
There's not.
And then State's Exhibit 25, can you tell me what that is?
This is depicting the backside of the neck, and this is showing an exit gunshot wound associated with the entrance that we just previously identified as the left upper neck.
And State's Exhibit 26,
This photograph is showing the chest. Specifically, the left side of the chest shows an entrance gunshot wound.
And this would be what you noted as the third gunshot wound?
Correct.
Okay. And I believe State's Exhibit 27, is that a closer up picture of that?
Yes, same injury, just closer framing.
Okay. Can you describe that wound for me, what you're seeing there?
We typically describe gunshot wounds as lacerations. A laceration describes a blunt force injury that causes tearing of the skin. So I see a roughly oval laceration, and around that laceration you'll notice a slight red-brown discoloration. That might be an abrasion caused by the bullet passing through the skin, and the abrasion, just to clarify, is like a scrape. So it's a scrape left behind by the bullet.
And then State's Exhibit 28. Can you talk about what you observed when you took this photo?
This photo shows several different injuries. In association with the injury that we just saw in State's Exhibit 27, the gunshot wound to the chest, you'll notice in the mid portion of this image, in the mid back, there's an exit wound associated with that entrance wound to the chest.
As far as these scrapes, can you describe those further for me, or how they would occur?
I can't determine definitively how they would occur. There are several different scenarios in which they could have occurred and timing at which they may have occurred. But to describe the abrasions, it's a diffuse abrasion with some linear patterns to them, which would be suggestive that the injury or the object that caused the injury was dragged across the body, or the body was dragged across that object. But I can't say definitively what circumstances led to that.
Thank you. Was there anything else that you observed when you were conducting your external examination, apart from the 3 gunshot wounds and then the abrasions to the decedent's back?
There were abrasions to the forehead and to the nose, and then an additional abrasion to the left forearm.
Okay. So I believe that's State's Exhibit 30. You mentioned some abrasions to the forehead.
Yes, they are depicted in State's Exhibit 30.
Okay, thank you. And this is all part of your external examination?
It is.
Okay, so after you perform your and Your Honor, if I don't believe we need the photos anymore, thank you.
Thank you.
After conducting your external examination, what's next?
After conducting the external examination and collecting any necessary evidence, then we perform the internal examination.
When you say necessary evidence, what do you mean by that?
It can include any foreign debris that's deemed to be of significant nature, might be projectiles. You can see, as I mentioned, the hands were bagged, so we will collect fingernail clippings to preserve any DNA evidence, additional blood DNA for law enforcement to use for further identification, as well as a sample of scalp hair.
And do you recall, were there any projectiles that you found within Mr. Jones's body?
There were none.
I'm sorry?
There were none. No projectiles.
Thank you. Do you also perform a tox screen in connection with the autopsy?
We do.
And did you do so in this case?
Yes.
Can you tell me, was Mr. Jones's tox screen positive for any substances?
It was. The toxicology screen looks for a basic panel of common drugs of abuse, and we found it was positive for methamphetamine and amphetamine.
Okay. As far as when you received those results and the levels of that toxicology screen, what does that tell you as a medical examiner?
In some cases, it can be relevant to helping me determine the cause and manner of death. In this case in particular, I deemed it to be non-contributory towards the cause of death.
Okay, so it's just a positive drug screen.
Correct.
And as far as the levels of the drug in the system, did it tell you anything in this case?
Simply a value of the level of the blood.
Thank you. Were you able then to determine a cause and manner of death for Mr. Jones?
I was.
Can you please discuss that further for me, starting with the cause?
The cause of death was determined to be multiple gunshot wounds, meaning some injuries of the 3 gunshot wounds we previously described altogether led to Mr. Jones's death.
So we can't determine which one was more fatal versus another?
Any one of them individually could be considered fatal if untreated.
And what about manner of death?
Manner of death was determined to be homicide.
All right, that's it for the direct examination of the assistant medical examiner. Let's bring back in our guest who is standing by, Deputy Public Defender for LA County, Philip Dubé is with us. Philip, what stands out about this testimony from the medical examiner that may lend to help this jury decide between whether this was murder or perhaps self-defense?
It's interesting, but the forensics really are telling a story now. First of all, what we have is this is clearly not an execution-style murder. How do we know that? Well, first of all, the shots were not done up close. I mean, typically you put a barrel up to somebody's head, you pull the trigger, and you would see stippling around the wound entry, that whole area. You don't have that here. So it means that the gun was discharged from afar. Well, what does that tell us? Well, I think forensically what it tells us is that there was some type of an emergency situation rather than a planned ambush or a planned attack. And it sounds like it was fortunate or fortuitous that Alec, in fact, had a firearm to parry whatever danger was afoot at the time. What else do we know from all that? Well, Dad was under the influence of methamphetamine, which is a little weird, frankly. Usually you would think it would be the kids that are using drugs and there's some type of melee or argument in the home. But the methamphetamine came up positive in Dad's blood, it means not only was it present in his system, but Dad was actually under the influence. When it's in the blood, you are under the influence, and we all know what type of bizarre effects you can get from methamphetamine. And who knows how he may have been acting out before the fatal shots while they were in that house. And, you know, we're not talking about a mansion, a palatial estate. We're talking about a 1,456 square foot bungalow in Fort Dodge, Iowa. And I liken it to the old Edith and Archie Bunkers type stucco box in Queens, New York. It's a little house. So it sounds like they were all in pretty tight quarters. Everybody must have heard what was going on. So it's not as if somebody was in the main house or the guest house out in the back and there was this surprise ambush. Something obviously went down, and it sounds like the forensics are telling a pretty good defense story for now.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned under the influence in terms of Dad. I want to mention that the notice of defense for this defendant, they list 3 affirmative defenses they plan to or could bring up in front of this jury, and that's self-defense, justification, and intoxication. A lot of times, Philip, we say intoxication isn't an excuse, but talk about how it can be used as a defense.
They have to prove that there was an intent to kill on the part of Alec, and of course on the part of the brother if he was in on it. The voluntary intoxication, just like mental illness, can be used to negate that element of intent. If you were so impaired from the effects, then the jury can find you, in fact, did not harbor that intent, and in theory, they can cut you loose on the murder.
Thank you for all that analysis, Philip Dubé. Stand by. We have to squeeze in a break, but we're going to get back in that courtroom for the cross-examination of the medical examiner in the case against Alec Jones. Stay with us.
So with regards to grabbing blood and sending for toxicology, is that something that is typically done?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you do not actually have the toxicology results created in the state medical examiner's office. Is that right?
We do not have a toxicology laboratory.
You send out the blood to a certified toxicology laboratory. Is that right?
Correct.
And do you use the same laboratory every time?
The majority of cases, yes.
What is the laboratory you normally use?
NMS.
Where are they located?
I can't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay. But when you send off the results, when you send off the blood for testing, you typically get results back from them. Is that right?
We do.
And what's the normal turnaround time?
It can range depending on the complexity of the testing. It can range depending upon the backlog of whatever specific laboratory is performing the testing. I'd say my experience since starting at this office in Iowa has been about 3 weeks.
Okay. And by the way, how long have you been in Iowa?
Just starting this position in January.
And where were you before?
Oklahoma.
Okay. So when you get these toxicology reports back, do you then rely on those toxicology reports in the typical practice of your position as a state medical examiner?
I wouldn't say rely, but I'd say it's useful in informing us in the greater picture of the circumstances.
Is it something that is typically utilized by individuals as state medical examiners?
In my experience at the offices I've worked at, yes.
Okay. In this case, you did receive back the toxicology reports from NMS, is that right?
Correct.
And you actually incorporated them into your autopsy report, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Dr. Deal, I've provided you with what's been pre-marked as Defense Exhibit SS for identification. Would you take a look through that?
Sure.
Do you recognize that as your toxicology report that you received on the case involving Dennis Jones?
There are 4 pages in Exhibit SS, pages 2 through 4, I do recognize.
Okay. And the first page is a business certification?
It appears to be.
Okay. With regards to page 2 through 4, does it fairly and accurately represent the report that you received back from the lab?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, we'd move to admit Defense Exhibit SS.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
It is in without objection.
Okay. Now, Dr. Deal, when it comes to these toxicology reports, are you trained in understanding how different substances affect the body?
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay. And there are some substances as an ME that you probably see more often than others. Is that fair?
Say depending on the jurisdiction.
Do you have some experience seeing methamphetamine before?
I do.
That's kind of a scourge in our country. Is that fair to say?
I do see it frequently.
Okay. In this case, the toxicology reports found 1,100 nanograms of methamphetamine. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Basic question, is that a lot?
It requires a more detailed explanation.
Okay. Let's start with an easy one. Have you seen people die of methamphetamine with lower amounts than 1,100 nanograms?
Yes.
Okay. Is it also fair to say that methamphetamine can kill a person?
Yes.
It can also alter people's behavior. Is that fair?
Generally speaking.
Now, along with the methamphetamine, there was also amphetamine. Is that right?
That's correct.
And there was a lower amount of amphetamine. Is that right?
That's correct.
The amphetamine was at 220. Is that right?
220 nanograms per milliliter.
We're hitting the pause button on this testimony, and let's bring in Deputy Public Defender from LA County, Philip Dubé. Philip, the defense there highlighting the methamphetamines found in the victim's body. You highlighted that. What do you think that will say to the jury about this altercation that happened between father and sons?
Okay, this is somebody who wasn't just dabbling in meth. This is an extraordinarily high quantity. This is a lethal, almost toxic dose. And hopefully the defense will be calling a toxicologist to the stand to explain the mind-altering effects of meth on the human body and on the human brain when you are appearing at that high of a therapeutic or toxic dose. I do believe that it can induce a form of psychosis and make you violent, frankly. I cannot tell you how many clients I've had to defend over the years, Julia, who commit their crimes while high as a kite on meth. And it sounds like that this shooting was probably reactionary, if you will, and done in an emergency situation based on some type of psychotic, violent episode of dad. And hopefully that's where they're going. And they might want to put on their own toxicologist just to explain some of the symptoms associated with that type of high dose, because now we're starting to get somewhere even without the opening. And now I know why the defense waived opening, because they wanted to see what they could develop through their own cross. But now I see where they're going.
Okay, well, they've gotten your attention a bit more now that they are using this cross effectively. Let's talk about, though, trying to get these witnesses to talk about, because they can say that he had this high amount of meth, but you don't know definitively how a person was acting just based on what's in their system alone. What do you anticipate either will come out through the testimony of the brother on the stand? We know he could be called, or if someone else was inside the home or knowledgeable of this family to help with the prosecution's case that, hey, this was a killing and it was not in self-defense.
Well, first of all, there's also this common sense approach. Methamphetamine is a stimulant. You know, it's not a suppressant, something that'll make you amorous and want to canoodle and spoon somebody's nape, if you will. It makes you psychotic, frankly, if you take too much. And that's what it sounds like happened here. And hopefully they're going to put somebody on separate and apart from a toxicologist to explain to the jury how he was behaving in the house and why he had to react the way he did under the circumstances. One other good fact, I think, is that the shooting itself did not occur at the dump site. It occurred in the house, because it tends to show that there was some type of reactionary emergency event, and then the body was dumped just to cover it up. That's a very good fact. It also negates the fact that it could have been an ambush, like a lying in wait type attack, an execution style murder, when in fact it was just a place to put the body. But so far, I'm actually giving a shout out to the defense. They have some good evidence on their side.
And we'll see how everything unfolds there inside of this courtroom. Again, the reason that it's delayed, and this happened yesterday, is because the judge has ordered a 24-hour wait on us delivering this, and that's why we are unfolding it now. Philip Dubé, the only man I know who can fit canoodling and meth in the same sentence. But have a good rest of your day. Thank you for coming on. Coming up, we are going to be picking it up where we left off with the cross-examination of that assistant medical examiner on the stand. Are they going to be bringing out more details that Philip Dubé says helps them to understand why they didn't put on an opening statement in this case? Again, this is the dad in the ditch trial for defendant Alec Jones, the son of the victim. We have more after this break. Stay with us. Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
The defendant stalked, planned, and calculated to kill his own father.
So I walked down in the ditch. There was a piece of carpet on it. I pulled the carpet off, and it appeared to be a body.
There's an entrance gunshot wound to the left forehead.
That would be that lower bullet hole that had just been patched and with paint.
But did Nathan shoot your father? Not that I know of. He was with me.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae in this morning for Julie Grant. Thank you for following along with us as we bring you the dad in a ditch murder trial out of Iowa. It's happening this morning. Alec Jones and his brother are accused of gunning down their own father, then dumping his body in a ditch where it was discovered by a postal worker. Prosecutors say the victim, Dennis Jones, actually called 911 the night that he was killed to say he suspected his sons were up to no good. Now, because we're not allowed to air this trial live, according to the judge, we have to wait 24 hours before we can air it. So now we are catching you up on testimony from day one, which was yesterday, that has not aired yet. Right now, let's listen to more of the testimony from the assistant medical examiner who testified on Wednesday. This is still cross-examination by the defense.
Now, you cannot tell when exactly methamphetamine was consumed by Dennis Jones. Is that right?
I cannot.
And you can't tell whether the metabolized amphetamines were occurring because of one dose or many doses. Is that fair?
I cannot.
Okay. But you can tell that the methamphetamine level was pretty high, right?
Determination of the value, whether high or low, is something that I don't provide in this report.
Okay. But you've seen people killed by less. Is that right?
I've seen deaths attributable to lower concentrations, yes.
Okay. And you would also agree that blood levels of 200 to 600 nanograms per milliliter have been reported in methamphetamine abusers who exhibited violent and irrational behaviors. Is that right?
As referenced in the NMS report description, which I did not generate, I believe that language is there.
Well, you are an expert, right?
Correct. In forensic pathology.
Okay. And as a forensic pathologist, you do typically rely upon the information provided in similar reports such as this toxicology report, right?
Correct.
And you also typically rely upon the expert statements of the toxicologist who you send this information out to. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So do you have any disagreement that blood levels of 200 to 600 nanograms per milliliter have been reported in methamphetamine abusers who exhibited violent and irrational behavior?
Stating that it has been reported in those circumstances, that seems appropriate in certain circumstances.
Okay. What would you consider to be a high dose of methamphetamine?
One that leads to someone's death.
Okay. So 1,100 nanograms per milliliter could be a high dose, is that correct?
If it were to lead to someone's death.
Okay. And you've seen doses lower lead to people's deaths?
I have.
Okay. You would agree that high doses of methamphetamine can also elicit restlessness, confusion, hallucinations, and compulsions?
Those symptoms can be associated with stimulant uses such as methamphetamine.
Okay. They can also be associated with aggressive behavior and irrational reactions.
Those are also symptoms that have been attributed.
Okay. And amphetamines alone, not just methamphetamines, but amphetamines can cause changes in attitude, judgment, and impulsivity. Is that right?
Those symptoms have also been attributed to amphetamines.
It can also lead to hypervigilance. Is that right?
I would probably need a clear definition of hypervigilance.
What would your definition of hypervigilance be?
If we're saying increased activity, yeah, you can see increased activity or restlessness.
Okay. And you'd agree that that can be attributable to amphetamines, is that correct?
That symptom can be attributed, yes.
Now let's discuss some of the injuries that you were discussing. You were talking about the gunshot wounds, is that right?
Correct.
And you were mentioning stippling, is that right?
It was asked, yes.
Okay. You mentioned with stippling that if somebody was at close range, depending on the type of bullet and depending on if there was any intermediary target, you might expect stippling, is that right?
Those factors might alter whether or not we see stippling.
Okay. Did you have a chance to observe the casings and bullets from this case?
I did not.
Okay, so you cannot form an opinion as to whether you could expect stippling in this case, is that right?
That determination would be something more for the realm of the ballistics or firearms expert.
Okay. Also, with regards to a gunshot wound to the head, you indicated that on the entry wound you weren't seeing stippling, is that right?
That's correct.
If somebody was wearing a hat over where the shot was, would that affect the likelihood of stippling?
It could obscure the presence of stippling or prevent it altogether.
Okay. If a shot were to ricochet off, let's say, a door frame or something, would that possibly also affect the ability for there to be stippling?
Yes.
Okay. How close do you typically have to be for there to be stippling?
Generally speaking, unobstructed 6 to 12 inches is a generally accepted distance, but it does vary quite a bit.
Prosecution wanted to highlight that lack of stippling to say that this was a far away range shooting, not one that was close up. Let's bring in our domestic violence expert and former law enforcement officer guest. Claudia King is with us. Claudia, this is a case of really domestic violence in the home. If it happened either way, that the prosecution says it happened or the defense saying this was self-defense against an abusive father, what's your analysis from a domestic violence expert perspective perspective of this case, the parties, and how this perhaps looks to a jury?
So far, I don't really see any evidence of abuse on the part of the father to the sons. There may have been something between the dad and the mom that maybe the sons wanted to come in and try to protect her, come to her aid, or come to her rescue. She has said she doesn't know anything and she doesn't know what happened, but it wasn't premeditated. And I think that was a very interesting statement from her, because if she doesn't know anything, why does she know it's not premeditated? I like where the defense is going as far as, trying to look at the drugs that the dad was taking and saying maybe that altered his behavior. But again, typically in domestic violence cases, you're going to see more signs from the victims. They're not going to, take the body away from the site and hide it. They're going to call 911. Typically, those are the things that are going to happen in a domestic violence situation. So I'm just not sure that argument will work if that's the way the defense is going.
Yeah, the self-defense argument doesn't work. What's your thought on the prosecution's case without seeming to have a clear motive? They mentioned there were some arguments, and apparently those arguments had dissipated at the time. The father left, then came back, and then just realized his sons were acting strangely, started texting his daughter to say, I think they're going to do me harm. Your thoughts on that element of this case and whether it makes it more difficult for the prosecution when you don't have this clear, seemingly logical motive?
I think it does make it more difficult sometimes, because even though a motive isn't necessary always, a jury wants to know why. They want to be able to put all the pieces together and really understand why something happened. To me, it is concerning that the dad was, texting the daughter, calling 911. He had a sense that something was going wrong. I'm starting to wonder if everybody was doing drugs and the sons, were overcome by the drugs that they were on, and for whatever reason decided to shoot dad, because life insurance isn't really an issue. That would seemingly go to mom. There aren't any clear-cut motives, so I'm starting to wonder if this was a drug-fueled event by all parties involved.
And we know that Alec Jones, in his affirmative defense's filing prior to this trial going forward, said that possibly intoxication will be part of their defense, meaning he was intoxicated with what? We will find out as this trial unfolds. Claudia King, stand by. We have more testimony ahead after this quick break from a responding officer on that scene.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan.
In every story, in every trial, every case, there's at least two sides to it.
To dive into the latest.
Oh my God.
And breaking true crime stories.
This was a very targeted, very personal attack.
Inside.
I've never seen that in Discovery. I've been incarcerated 3 years.
And outside of the courtroom.
She's a psychopath.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central. Only on Court TV.
Back to Court TV Live. Let's get you back into the courtroom for the case against Alec Jones, the dad in the ditch trial. Alec Jones is accused of shooting his father, Dennis, with the help of his younger brother, Nathan. The brothers are being tried separately. Nathan, the younger brother, is going to go to trial at a different time, and we understand he may be called as a witness against his brother in this trial. We'll see. Let's listen now to testimony from Lieutenant Zach Stanley, who responded to the crime scene. This report of a man's body being found in a ditch.
And you were working on April 26th.
Yes.
At some point, did you respond to 280th Street in rural Webster County?
I did.
What did you respond to?
I overheard a call come in. Mail carrier had found what they believed to be a body. Deputy Randleman responded to the call. Shortly after responding, I heard her call out that she needed 79, which would be medical examiner, and to get CID there.
Did you make any observations when you arrived on the scene?
Yes, when I arrived on scene, I located a deceased male in the south ditch of, I guess that'd be the north ditch, of 280th Street.
At some point during the investigation, was that body identified?
Yes, it was.
And what was that identification?
Dennis Jones.
What happened next in your investigation?
During the course of the initial investigation, we canvassed the area about a mile each direction, looking for cameras, any type of evidence that would kind of indicate why the body was in a ditch.
Did you eventually learn of his address within the city of Fort Dodge?
Yes, I did.
Do you know what that is?
2nd Avenue South.
And did you do anything with that residence?
Yes, the second that, just to backtrack a little, after the identification of Dennis Jones, we had learned about a call that had been placed the night before, and in doing so, I instructed Detective Johnson to head over to that residence and observe it. Keep eyes on it, I guess.
And you're a little quiet. Can you get a little closer to the microphone, maybe? So
yep, I can do that.
Eventually, was that residence searched?
It was.
And did you participate in that?
I did.
What observations did you make when you were in the kitchen area?
Immediately, I noticed on the floor it appeared that a rug was missing. I say that due to the two-sided tape on all 4 corners that was still remaining on the floor.
And do we see that in State's Exhibit 37?
You do.
What other observations did you make?
Immediately following that, I noticed a bullet hole in the deep freeze.
And if we look at State's Exhibit 38, what do we see in that picture?
That would be the location of the deep freeze with a bullet hole in that front face of it.
And if we move on to 39,
close up of this.
Is that like towards the top of that picture? Is that a ruler?
Yes,
And what is above that?
They're little scales to identify the size of these holes.
How about the kitchen wall? Did you observe, what did you make of observations of the kitchen wall?
There were multiple holes in the kitchen wall that had been recently repaired. And looking through that, it appeared that they were bullet holes, as one had traveled through the wall, through an American flag on the other side into the entryway.
Can you turn to State's Exhibit 47? What do you see in that picture?
The patched holes in the wall, along with a putty knife or a spackling knife, I guess, under the number 2.
And when you say they had been repaired, had they been filled? Had they been painted? What had been done?
They had been filled. There was a lower one that was painted. You could tell that because the paint had just dripped over the trim, I believe.
If we look at State's Exhibit 49, is that what you're describe to the jury what you see here?
That would be that lower bullet hole that had just been patched and with paint.
And that paint appeared to be fresh?
Yes.
And if you go back to Exhibit 48 for me, what's that a close-up of?
A bullet hole.
What was on the opposite side of the kitchen wall?
This wall in particular, it was the entryway. There was an American flag that was on the wall.
So this wall with the holes faced the entryway?
Correct.
And if you look at State's exhibits starting at 34, I believe, 34 and 35. Excuse me, starting at 33. That's that entryway?
Correct, that's the entryway.
And the American flag on the wall, that's the opposite side of the kitchen wall?
Correct.
And what are we looking at in State's Exhibit 34?
That would be the same scale that we use to measure holes.
And what do we see above that scale?
That it is on the American flag and it is below the bullet hole.
And in State's Exhibit 35?
Close up of the hole.
How How do these images relate to the actual case against the defendant in this case, who is, we expect, going to be arguing self-defense? Let's bring in domestic violence expert and former law enforcement officer Claudia King and trial attorney Krista Ramey joining us. Krista, let me start with you. Your initial thoughts on this case and the defense that we're expecting from the defendant, Alec Jones, saying that this was self-defense against an abusive father.
If you're going to do self-defense, it's a big mistake not to do an opening statement. I was really surprised by that. So that's going to be an interesting path to take now. And right now, the way this evidence is mounting up, I heard Claudia in the last segment, and I completely agree with her. You know, this is not, you know, coming out as someone like that is a survivor of domestic violence. This is, you know, you don't cover up your actions. This looks more like a premeditated action on the part of the son. So I think right now the state is mapping out a pretty strong case, showing all of the cover up after the fact as well.
Yeah, Claudia, you did mention that with the carpet. We heard that through this responding officer, the carpet removed, the rug removed from the home, which we expect is going to be connected to that carpet that is rolled up or placed over the victim in this case when he was found in that ditch. What else is standing out to you about what we are seeing from these bullet holes and what the responding officer is able to bring to the jury at this point?
The fact that the bullet holes are being literally covered up, you know, they're being patched, painted over. I mean, this screams, we are hiding what we did and we're never going to talk about it. And so I agree with Krista, self-defense is going to be really, really difficult. And the more evidence that we're seeing, it's getting more and more difficult to believe that that would be possible. These just aren't the actions of people who were in fear, acted out of that fear of death or serious bodily injury, and you know, were in shock because it's clear they immediately got rid of the body, started cleaning up, probably within hours. So as the evidence mounts by the prosecution, I'm thinking self-defense is less and less plausible.
Krista Ramey, let's talk about self-defense and the brother in this case, who's not there at trial. Case was severed. So Nathan may come in, this younger brother who was there, point the finger at the defendant, but the cross may be effective in making it seem like he's the trigger person. Do you think they're waiting to say self-defense before they perhaps try to pin this on the co-defendant in this case?
That's an interesting theory, Julie. I don't know, and I think that actually it makes, you know, it makes sense. But you oftentimes, when you have cases like this that sever, sometimes what you see is once you see the writing on the wall, you'll get a plea deal from the one that, you know, maybe wasn't the trigger man here. So for the brother in waiting, we'll call him. And so you might end up with a plea deal and then, you know, attack your brother, you know, your brother's credibility, I guess, is how you're going to go at it. You know, in this trial itself, you'll have your attorney, you know, attack you made a deal, or you're just trying to save your own hide. I don't think that this brother is going to testify unless he makes a deal, though. So we shall see what happens.
Right. We don't expect him to come in out of the goodness of his heart. So we will see. And maybe even the prosecution isn't sure that they can use him because we don't know for sure. And it wasn't mentioned in the opening statement that he is going to say, or we will hear from him. Claudia and Krista, stand by. We're going to squeeze in a break, and then we're going to watch the remaining testimony of this officer who's on the stand under cross, Lieutenant Zach Stanley. Thanks for being with us.
You stated you had observed patches to that wall that appeared to be new.
Correct.
If you look at State's Exhibit 51 in your binder.
Yep.
And I would ask for permission to publish, Your Honor.
Just give me a second to get that technology on.
What do we see? What do we see there?
The putty knife.
And where was that located?
Right on the microwave, directly in front of that wall.
So very near to the kitchen wall.
Correct.
And you had also testified about fresh paint on that wall.
I did.
If you can look at State's Exhibit 53. What do we see in that picture?
Paint bucket or paint can.
And where Are we still in that residence?
Yes, we're still in the residence.
And where are we at now?
Upstairs, I believe the hallway area.
And that can was found like that and was open?
Correct.
Did that color match what was on the wall?
Yes, it did.
You had talked, before I get there, did you make observations on the screen door that provided entry into the kitchen?
I did. In one of my passes through into the entryway, I observed what I believe to be blood on the screen door.
And if you look at State's Exhibits 45 and 46, I think 45 is maybe a little bit further away. What do we see there?
That would be the screen door going into the entryway.
And what observation did you make?
There was red stain on the door. So, yeah, Exhibit 45. And then on 46 would just be the close-up of the door where I took the 2 samples, which would be outlined in chalk.
That's the direct examination of the lieutenant. Here's the defense's cross of this same witness.
You said just now that you were assigned to the suite of the house, correct?
Yes.
And so that's the initial entry into the house where the officers are securing the occupants inside, correct?
Correct.
And there were a number of officers that were involved in this, correct?
Yes.
Did you have your body camera on at that point?
I did.
Okay. Do other officers have their body cameras on?
Per our policy, Fort Dodge police officers will have their body cameras on.
At some point, though, you turned your body camera off, correct?
Correct.
When did you turn your body camera off?
After the residence was secure.
So the actual sweep of the residence, we have no video of that on your body. Or excuse me, the actual search.
Not correct.
Okay. You stated that, I believe it was Detective Johnson who took overall pictures of the residence, correct?
Correct.
Was that on the inside as well?
Yes, it was.
And so she would have done that after the sweep was had occurred, but before the actual search of the residence, correct?
Correct.
And the overall pictures that she took, they did not include the insides of things like drawers, shelves, things like that.
No.
So when you talked earlier about getting this hammer out of the drawer, we don't know what else was in the drawer, correct?
Correct.
Don't have any pictures that would show us what was in any of the other drawers that you may not have taken items out of, correct?
Correct.
Was Detective Johnson the person then who was in charge of scenes integrity?
That would have been Agent Thompson, or Special Agent Thompson with the DCI.
Okay. So as far as you know, did Special Agent Thompson report who was going in and out of each of the rooms?
I just know our evidence collection point was out in that entryway. I don't know if he was documenting or what he was documenting.
You didn't have to sign in or out anytime you were going into the house?
No.
You would agree with me that scene integrity is important in an investigation?
Absolutely.
All right, that wraps up one of the state's witnesses. Let's bring back in our panel to discuss domestic violence expert and former law enforcement officer Claudia King and trial attorney Krista Ramey. Krista, let me start with you. Just tell me if you think this is moving the ball any one way or the other, this testimony that we've gotten from this responding officer.
Yeah, you're showing a very meticulous covering up of a crime, and not a very good one at that. You know, so they're there's spackle that then they leave the spackle tools out as they're trying to cover up bullet holes in the wall. They've got wet paint on the the baseboards. They've got bullet holes and flags. I mean, it's like they were trying to get caught. The cover up is terrible here, and I think that when you have all, start combining all of this evidence with them leaving and going to the bar for a few hours in between, it doesn't look good for them.
Yeah,
at all right now.
It kind of looks like a chaotic scene. Maybe the defense can use that to in their favor in the end. But Claudia, let's talk about the mother here. This is someone who, according to the defense, was a victim of the shooting victim in this case. She was being perhaps battered by her husband, that her sons may have come to her defense. But you heard the interview that she gave where she said it wasn't premeditated, but she wasn't there. She doesn't know anything, doesn't know how it happened. Do you put her on the stand, do you think, as a defense witness or a state witness, but she may be a victim herself?
She may be, and we won't know that unless we hear from her. I will say that what we have seen from her so far, I don't really see that she is a victim, but we're not sure yet. As far as putting her on the stand, that's a tough one. You know, I think the prosecution could use her and her statements that she has already made to say, we had an argument, but it was fine and I went to bed. You know, she claims she didn't hear anything. She claims she doesn't know anything, and that all just does not add up. So I think the defense would have a hard time utilizing her as a witness or even on cross to help substantiate what the kids are saying, because she just hasn't indicated any of that to this point, and she hasn't given any indication that that is the case, that she was being abused, that it was in the moment, that they needed to protect her. I just don't think that's the case. So I don't think she'd be a great defense witness at all.
Yeah, it seems like she's really claiming innocence at this point, ignorance rather, at this point, but she said her boys are good boys, and perhaps still supporting them even throughout this trial. We're going to get to a break. We have the police interrogation of the defendant, Alec Jones, videotape. We'll bring that to you after this break. Let's go back to the trial we are watching out of Iowa, the dad in a ditch trial. We are about to get to the police interrogation tapes of Alec Jones. Prosecutors say the 26-year-old changed his story several times about what happened to his father, along with his brother. He was with his brother Nathan at the time. During a police interrogation, Jones talked about family dynamics and claimed the night that his father was killed, he came home to a mess. Here's investigator Larry Hedlund on direct, who, by the way, takes the stand again today in real time.
Do you understand why you're here? Okay. You know, you're probably pretty confused right now, and I get that. So essentially, we just got a call that your dad was missing.
Yeah, I haven't seen him in like a day.
Okay.
Since last night.
Okay, gotcha. Before we get into that, though, can I get some background information about you? I don't know a whole lot about you.
Like, what do you mean?
Like, do you live at the 1440?
Yeah.
Okay. 2nd Avenue South, right?
Yeah.
Who do you live with at the 1440 address?
My mom, my brother, my dad, and his girlfriend, I guess.
Your dad's girlfriend?
Yeah.
Or your brother's girlfriend?
My dad's.
Okay. What's your mom's name?
Shannon Jones.
Okay, and we know your brother's Nathan with the matching tattoo.
What's your time, 17?
What's your dad's girlfriend's name?
Kaylin.
Kaylin?
Yeah. Kaylynn.
What's her last name?
Julius.
Okay. How does that work out with your dad living with your mom and his girlfriend?
I don't know. They just like stick to themselves. My mom stays upstairs and he stays downstairs.
Okay, they don't fight or anything like that?
I mean, there's arguments, but that's about it.
Just normal, like, parent arguments?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's pretty cool that they can all get along, and...
Him and Kaylin, though, that's a different story.
Now, do they fight a lot?
Every night.
Really?
Hitting each other, spitting, everything.
Okay. What are they fighting about?
Drugs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just using dope and fighting about drugs. Okay.
Yeah.
Meth?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. And I know you said you drink earlier. What about drug use at all? Do you use drugs?
I just smoke weed.
Just smoke weed? Well, that's not bad. It'll be legal here anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Josh, but I'm very pro-weed. And I feel bad saying it. It's not the view of my department or anything like that. I'm just going to say that I'm very pro weed, and my dad lives in Illinois, so he can go get it. So whenever I visit my dad, I get to look at all his products that he gets, and he'll get like Oreos and peanut butter and just all this different really cool stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and it's obviously I can't smoke it, but no, it's pretty neat.
You smoke, or you using like a vape?
Yeah, I vape.
Vape the THC?
Oh, no. I just smoke like blunts.
Okay.
Okay.
When was
That's
the last time you did smoke?
Like 2 days ago.
A couple days ago? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you in a relationship with anybody at all, Alec?
No, I just got out of one.
Okay. You know, it seems kind of weird with this day and age. You have a preference, or were you with a boyfriend or girlfriend?
I had a girlfriend.
Girlfriend. Okay.
What was her name?
Ashley.
Ashley what?
Eddington.
Don't worry, we're not gonna go talk to her or anything like that. Why'd you guys break up?
It's not fun.
Why'd you guys break up?
Well, we had a kid, and DHS got involved because of the drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
And she had to take her out of the house, and then she just ended up like moving like 2 hours away.
Oh,
and then she just broke up with me.
How long were you together?
About 2 years.
That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
How old's the kid?
She just turned 1 in February.
When's the last time you talked to him?
Well, last night, but it wasn't really talking. It was just him yelling at me.
Okay, tell me about that. Tell me about that.
Well, me and my mom went downstairs to make some food, and he just started like yelling, flipping, smacked her, all that stuff. And then we just went upstairs. And then she went to sleep, and I left and went to a bar.
Okay. What bar did you go to?
Bootleggers.
What time do you think that was?
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay. How about this? How about we start at the beginning of your day yesterday? Kind of just walk me through your day step by step.
Well, I woke up, went to the bathroom.
What time did you wake up, Alec?
Around 10, I think.
10-ish a.m.
Went to the bathroom, went back to my room, looked at my phone for like another hour, went downstairs, made some coffee, listened to put some music on, started lifting some weights. Then my mom got home from work. Like it was just weights from like noon till like 4.
Okay. That's a long time.
And then she got home. We were upstairs chilling for like another couple hours. Came downstairs. And then that's just when they started arguing. And we went back up.
So this is just you and Mom, and you guys are up. When you say upstairs, like you're upstairs in the house, like the second story?
Yeah.
Okay. Just you and Mom upstairs?
Yeah.
All right. What was going on upstairs?
We were just chilling, talking.
What time did your mom get home? Like from where's she working?
Silgan Containers.
Okay.
Which usually gets home about 4:30.
Okay.
4:45 or so.
So is that about when she got home yesterday, you think? Okay.
Yeah.
And you and her went upstairs. Is there a reason like you go upstairs?
Yeah, we just try to stay like separated from them.
From who?
My dad and Caitlin.
Okay. And where would they be?
Downstairs, the main floor, the bathroom by the fridge.
Okay. So Mom got home around 3:30, 4:30, 4:45-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys were upstairs hanging out for a few hours?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell me about coming downstairs when you guys were done hanging out up there.
Well, we just went downstairs and we was gonna start making some food.
Okay.
And
what'd you make?
Well, we didn't make nothing because it was just an argument.
Okay.
We were gonna make some shrimp and potatoes.
That sounds good. Tell me about the argument.
It was just about Kaylin, basically, because my mom took sticky notes and put them around everywhere on stuff that needed cleaned, and that was just the problem.
She wanted Kaylin to clean? Okay. And the sticky notes started the argument then?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Okay. What was being said during that argument?
I can't even remember.
Okay. That's okay. How was your dad reacting to the argument?
Well, he got in her face, he smacked her, and then that's just when we went upstairs again. We just left.
He smacked your mom, Shannon? Okay.
Like you said, they started an argument. How did that start? Who started?
My dad.
We're hitting the pause button on this testimony. It's compelling to hear the defendant in his own words. Let's bring back in domestic violence expert and former law enforcement officer Claudia King and trial attorney Krista Ramey. Claudia, what are you hearing when you listen to his voice recounting what the family and home dynamics were like?
Well, he's already contradicted himself because he originally said dad and mom had a fine relationship, that they didn't really interact too much, and that dad's girlfriend even lived there. So I'm really not believing the domestic violence aspect of it now, because I think if that were accurate, that's what he would have started with, rather than just very casually mentioning it later on in the interview and saying, oh, they got in a fight over sticky notes and he slapped her. So, I'm just having trouble believing what he's saying. I really like the officer's interrogation tactics, though, because they're being very casual, I'm pro-weed too. So really forming a bond with him so that he will open up and think, oh, these people are cool. They just want to hear my story. They just want to chat with me. So I really like that. And so now he's going to open up, he's going to make mistakes, and he's going to contradict himself, which is what I think will hang him in the end.
Yeah, that was a really interesting tactic from the officer. So friendly in talking with him, following up on his life. Krista Ramey, your thoughts on this interrogation, how it's unfolding so far?
Yeah, I agree with Claudia. I mean, it's like, hey, you're talking about pot brownies or whatever. She's just trying to vibe with him a little bit and get him to open up. And I think she's doing a really good job. And I think that we're going to hear her, even be able to peel that onion a little bit further as we listen. But I think that the interrogation has been very effective. And I agree with Claudia. You're really starting to see the contradictions in the story and the things that really are incongruent with domestic violence. If dad and mom were, having issues, and this is a protection of her issue, even a protection of others, a defense of others, sorry about that, but you would have seen maybe some indication that this relationship the dad had with the girlfriend is so unusual. And, why is mom okay with it? And why is, if it was a DV situation, I would imagine that it was forced on mom, and that, they, rubbed it in her face, and it was a constant source of conflict. And you wouldn't have it where it's just, casually, hey, we stay upstairs and they stay downstairs and whatever, and then there were some sticky notes. It's not a congruent story at all.
Yeah, Krista, real quick follow-up. I'm not hearing the fear. You have to be able to say that you were either in fear for your life or the fear that someone else was going to lose their life or have great bodily harm. Are you hearing that we're even getting close to that?
No, but I don't think at this point he's ready to say that he was involved at all. I think he just thinks that, they just think he's missing right now. And so they don't suspect that, he's dead yet. So I don't think he even knows yet that they know he's dead. So that's why I think that we're getting that.
Claudia, let me ask you about the smacking. We did hear the mother being smacked. That's what he said twice now. Are you thinking that it's possible that has happened before, that he's mentioning it, even if it wasn't the actual precipitator for this killing?
I think it is possible that that has happened in the past because of how he said it so casually. So it's definitely a possibility. But was this an ongoing abusive relationship? I just don't think it was. Now, not that that means smacking somebody once or twice is okay. It's not. But yeah, I just don't see this as this man who was overbearing, abusive, and was threatening the lives of anybody that particular night.
Yeah, bizarre situation going on inside of this home. We have to say goodbye to you, Claudia and Krista, but thank you for your analysis, for helping us break down these issues in these cases. We are going to see you real soon, and we're going to continue to monitor the Dad in the Ditch trial, bring you the updates and the highlights.